you know that public schools are really the heart of the community. It's where people come together, not just when there's a hurricane, but they also come together when there's a show, a football game, to meet the teachers. It's where children get to make friends with other kids in their neighborhood, and where parents get to become friends with the kids' parents, and they live in the same community. So it really is very central to our lives when we're growing up. We also know the value of a public education, that it's where children learn to think critically, where they read good literature, they learn truth about history, they learn many, many things that, well, frankly, you don't get in some of the other schools. So, you also know that there's an effort underway to discredit public education in public schools. There is an effort by state and federal legislators to totally dismantle our public schools. And that misinformation and disinformation is really problematic. So the reason we're having the panel tonight is to share the truth, what is really happening with public education, public schools. And we have some experts who are going to be sharing information with us. And as I call their names, they'll come up and take a seat right up here. So it's not an empty panel, it's a panel that's going to be filled with experts. Oh, okay. So our first expert is Holly Bullard. And Holly is an expert on a lot of things. Tonight she's going to talk about vouchers. She is Chief Strategy and Development Officer for the Florida Policy Institute. She spearheads FPI's fundraising, policy advocacy, coalition building, outreach, and communication strategies. She knows a lot. She previously served as Education and Working Family Tax Credits Policy Analyst. She has also served in a policy advocacy capacity for United Way Suncoast and was a legislative aide to Congressman Ruben Hinojosa, who chaired the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. Holly also gained valuable insights to public education while working at the U.S. Department of Education. She obtained her master's in public policy from Georgetown University and a bachelor's degree in political science from Emory University. In 2021, she was named to Emory University's 40 Under 40 list of distinguished alumni. She is proudly a product of Pinellas County Public Schools and a daughter of Florida's public educators. Another expert who's going to be talking tonight is Deb Hays. And Deb, also an expert on a lot of things, is going to be talking about Schools of Hope. And I know you've heard about them. Deb grew up in mid-central Illinois. She received a Bachelor of Science degree in nursing at Illinois Wesleyan University and then enrolled in an MS program in nursing studies at the University of Illinois, where she focused on administration, management, and leadership. Her first teaching job was at her alma mater, Illinois Wesleyan. When she moved to Florida, Deb joined the faculty at what was then Manatee Community College, where she was the director of continuing education for healthcare professions. From there, she began a nearly 25-year career in in areas as various as workplace development, health occupations, business analysis and support, and emergency management. Working in all these positions have been a benefit in recognizing how all parts of a school district function within the context of the entire public education system. We then have Norm Olshansky, who is an expert also in a lot of areas, but in particular in the separation of school and church, or state and church. You may have seen his column in the Herald Tribune recently on separation of church and state. He is retired president of NFP Consulting Resources, and previously he served as the executive director of the Jewish Federation of Sarasota, Manatee, and as regional director for the Anti-Defamation League in Virginia and North Carolina. Throughout his career and retirement, he has been an interfaith leader and currently serves as president of the Suncoast Jewish Alliance, and there's material about the alliance at the table at the back. His background includes being a frequent lecturer at universities, author of a syndicated column, a national book reviewer for Charity Channel, and is an active volunteer in several civic, religious, and professional organizations. His book, You and Your Nonprofit, has been a special resource for nonprofit professionals, leaders, volunteers, universities, and nonprofit resource centers. Mr. Olshansky has a master's degree in social work and has received national recognition for his work in human service and executive leadership. Our next person is an expert. Lucas Carpenter was born and grew up in Sarasota, Florida. He has been attending Sarasota public schools his whole life, and believe me, that makes you an expert on public schools. Currently, he is in his senior year at Suncoast Polytechnical High School. This summer, he plans on attending a Florida college to study zoology. Passionate about his education, Lucas attends and speaks at school board meetings. He often brings friends to either listen or to get involved and speak about policies that matter to them. Whether it is in school board meetings or school itself, Lucas makes it known that he cares about student voices. One can find him collecting just as many friends as he collects books. At college, Lucas hopes to continue this trend with new peers, be it at school board meetings or at the Capitol with representatives. And our final panelist, Jody Oseola, or Jordana Oseola, is a Sarasota-based parent engagement specialist, nonprofit founder, and community leader. And as a parent, she is an expert on what parents need from public schools. After graduating from Booker High School, she earned a nursing degree, transitioning into public relations and grassroots promotion within the music industry. Jody founded Thanks for Giving, the Joshua Morris Foundation, a 501c3 created in honor of her late brother, providing over 1,000 Christmas trees to local families in need. Jody co-chairs Wilkinson Elementary's Advisory Council and is founder of the Wilkinson Parents Group and SRQ Parents United, a district-wide parent network supporting family engagement and information sharing across Sarasota County Schools. As a member of a Miccosukee family and mother of 3 children with special needs, Jody began engaging independently with Sarasota County School Board, advocating for student services and protections. Her work has since grown into a broader, community-driven effort focused on trust, transparency, and inclusive public education for all families. So welcome to our expert panel. Thank you for being here. So we're going to start with asking Holly some questions about vouchers. Now, the legislators refer to vouchers as scholarships. So one question for you, are these truly scholarships? And what kind of impact have these vouchers or scholarships had on the Florida education budget and on Sarasota's school budget?
Sure, thank you. So Florida overall as a state that we've really we're kind of the first and the largest in terms of the voucher program itself. So vouchers being a supporter of people in the state of Florida. So sorry. Actually, the state of Florida is one of the largest in terms of the support of the voucher program, K-12 vouchers. We have had this for one of the longest amount of time in the nation, actually. So Florida, in the late 90s, basically, Florida in the late 90s started to drive down this path around supporting private schools with public dollars. And that was actually through this tax credit program that basically sidesteps a Supreme Court ruling in the late 90s in the state of Florida that said that we couldn't use public dollars for religious purposes. And by doing that, the governor at the time, Jeb Bush, pushed for this idea of tax credit vouchers. That program was around for around 15 years, and it was basically a diversion of tax dollars to this program that was oversaw by a nonprofits that would actually create tax credit programs and then deliver vouchers. So someone would say, if you call it a scholarship, it's basically private interests taking public dollars for the purposes of supporting schools in the nature. So, sorry, we got a little stuck in traffic, and I was but okay. So that's our program. So right as it stands now, Florida, over the last 26 years or so, our program has grown tremendously. And in 2018 and 2019, the organization that I worked for, Florida Policy Institute, we actually did a report on the program at that juncture. In 2020 to 2021, the program focused on students with disabilities mostly, and then also grew to low-income students. But then in 2023, we learned that the legislature was interested in expanding to all students. So anyone who had any private school student, and also homeschoolers is what they expanded that to in 2023, lifted the income cap. And so in 2023, it was known as HB1. They lifted the income cap, and it was basically blew up the budget, blew up the amount of students who would participate in that program, and more than tripled the amount of students in the program, and more than tripled the amount of money that's is actually coming out of the state dollars now, in addition to this the tax credit funding for that. So all to say that where does it basically started as a trickle, and it started as a trickle in the 90s, and like this one program of like, oh, well, students with disabilities aren't being served as well as they should be. And I don't think a lot of parents would disagree with that necessarily, but honestly, it's mostly because we haven't funded that program. We haven't funded our public schools to support students with disabilities as we should. The IDEA Act, the IDEA Act for students with disabilities has never been actually fully funded. And so what you see is parents, addressing this over the last 3 decades, needing to press for their kids, and then sort of politicians seeing that as an opportunity to divert funding. But if we're using the dollars in a way that could address some kids with disabilities, like the $4 to $5 billion that we actually spend on now for vouchers, if we were to be able to use that for things like our teacher pay, and also addressing the needs of kids with disabilities in our actual public schools, we'd actually see a much bigger return. And so actually being able to have those parents come back to our and be better served by our public school system. And so it's basically it's been a long time. It's something that Hemingway actually said one time, which like he asked in The Sun Also Rises, there's a famous quote where he says, I went bankrupt, very slow, but then all at once. And it's basically what happened to unfortunately with this voucher program, where it was very a trickle, and you had this kind of a camel's nose under the tent sort of thing. It's like, okay, well, kids with disabilities, now low-income kids, And then this really haymaker in 2023, which was HB1, that totally ballooned the cost of this and is now coming to bear in Sarasota, and also not only in Sarasota County, but all across the state. So on the Sarasota front, you see the cost of this because we actually, for the last 3 decades and more, Sarasota County, we have the benefit of having a millage, a voted millage and local property tax that actually supports more so for our students. On average, we have an older population, to be honest, in Sarasota County, and so that means fewer students per capita. And then we also have the benefit of having a lot of money in our property tax system because we're on the coast, and so we actually we're what is known as a property-rich district. There's about 5 or 6 of us across the state. There's us, Monroe County, St. John's, others that have, honestly, fewer students, more money in property tax. So what happens is our district actually has the value of being able to raise those dollars locally and be kind of protected from the state taking those dollars away. So this is what's happening right now. Like, as we speak, this is the first time that in the last quarter, this is the first time that I've known that this has happened. But there's 4 or 5 districts that actually, as we speak, we don't get any state dollars for Sarasota County Schools. This is what you saw, like this is what is coming home to roost for Sarasota right now, because our revenue, 90% of it comes from our property tax millage, and not just our millage, but our property tax overall. And then 10% of it comes from the state, like general revenue from the state. And by the state, that would be like going to the store, paying sales tax. We all pay sales tax in this room. Right now, none of that sales tax actually comes back to our public schools in Sarasota. All of that funds vouchers, okay? And it's mostly because we have a large private school. It's not kids leaving for vouchers. About 300 left over the last year or so, but it's 8,000 of the private school students who get $8,000 a pop. That money comes directly from our school. So that's $45 million from our school district that actually goes and leaves. So that's this long journey for 30 years where now we come to this place where Sarasota County, we actually get 0 state dollars. And so we're left to deal with lots of these other impacts, whether that's money then going to charters, the impacts of just fending off things like the Schools of Hope, but also inflation and just over time, a little bit of reduction of our student population. But I would say yes, Tom would be right in terms of the impacts of that we're seeing over time, inflation. But I would say that if you're going to take anything from what I say, it's we need to defend our in Sarasota County specifically, the property tax value that we have, and also really press the state on the fact that they didn't plan well. Okay, so when you right, they didn't plan well because in 2023 when they said, okay, we're going to pay for universal vouchers. Universal vouchers is not just all public school kids, but it's all private school kids. And when I was there in the Capitol, and when we were talking with some of our colleagues to say this is going to cost $5 billion over time, they didn't believe us. They said, "Oh, it's just going to cost $250 million." We have, at that juncture, we had a surplus. It's like we're going to pay for it with a surplus. But that just is, if you step back and you think about it, right? Why would, if you're a private school parent and you're paying $10,000 in tuition, why would you say no to $8,000? For free? Why you would not say no to it? And if you're a private school, only like I call them the creme de la creme, like the most some of the private schools that would be kind of seem is more elite, that they don't participate, but the vast majority of them participate in the voucher program. So we are funding 2 systems. We're funding the public school system and the private school system with the same amount of money. And so that was just never going to make sense ever. So when they said, "Oh, the money follows the student," no. 70% of the people who have participated in the voucher system since they expanded that, 70% had never stepped foot in a public school before. So you're funding this whole other system, and honestly, that goes down this rabbit hole of who are you funding? What's the accountability? What are the types of things they're doing? But I really care mostly about, as a public school parent with Jody, our kids are both at Wilkinson Elementary, the impacts that we're now starting to see of, even in a very honestly wealthy district like Sarasota. You can only imagine there's actually a handful of rural districts that right now are sending letters to the state and saying we're basically bankrupt because of this. And so I would love to see Sarasota band together with some other rich districts and actually push the state to be a little bit better about funding our state, and basically say, you know what, this called the FEFP formula, this whole bargain that Sarasota went into with the state, that's not something that they actually have to do. Like, technically Monroe County, some of these other counties have said, like, well, technically we could leave the formula. I would hate to see that, because DeSoto County and other counties would actually very much be at a deficit. It would be devastating. But we need to step up and press the state to actually fund schools better regardless, and to say, like, enough's enough without any guardrails on the voucher program.
So thank you very much, Holly. You know, if you're really interested in how awful the voucher program is, there was a scathing report from the auditors last October, and it outlines all the ways in which the voucher program has really failed and what the consequences are. While we don't have time to go into that tonight, I encourage you to take a look at it. It is on the website. So I want to ask Deb some questions.
First of all, that was really awesome. Thank you. And I learned a lot. I don't know what other people thought, but it was really cool. Can we be interactive, or do we just?
No. Well, what
are the rules of the game?
I should have said, there will be time for Q&A after all the speakers are done.
There's your answer.
But
It's okay, gratitude. You got this.
Yeah.
Cool.
We have 4 more people that are going to give you more information, so you're going to have a lot of questions, I know. But I want to ask Deb, there seems to be a lot of confusion between charters, like Schools of Hope, and vouchers. Is there a difference? Is it the same? People seem to talk about them in the same sentence. So.
It does. It gets very, very confusing very fast. And so I thought maybe I'd just start with some basic understanding of what these things are. What Holly was talking about are tax dollars going to private schools, parochial schools, private schools, and even home schools. And so we're dealing with vouchers in a private arena. But when we're talking about charter schools, those are public schools. And public schools, if you recall from your school days, there's a high school and a middle school and those kinds of things, which we typically think of as schools, as traditional public schools. But we also have, within the public school districts, specialty schools. Like in Sarasota, we have Pineview School for the Gifted. We have Suncoast Polytechnical High School. Those are public schools within our district. So we also have schools that have magnet programs, like Booker High School has the Arts Magnet. And so those are all traditional public schools. Excuse me. In the 90s, something called charter schools started rearing their heads. And it started actually based on teachers. It originally originated with teachers who thought they'd like to try something different. They'd like to have a little school where they try different approaches, and they'd run it themselves. And it gained a lot of traction through teacher unions because it was another way of looking at public education. Well, those days are long gone. Those we called the mom and pops. In our community, we have a lot of really, really good mom and pop charters. We have Suncoast Academy. We have in Venice Student Leadership Academy. We have Dreamers Academy. We have Sarasota Military Academy, and you've probably heard of those. Those are charter schools that were, they're public schools. They have a board, an unpaid board, a nonprofit board that manages their schools, and the school district has an oversight responsibility. They monitor their finances and all of that kind of thing. Now, most of those schools that were the mom and pops, their organization was managed by the board or the staff. So they did their own payroll, or they might contract out for payroll. They did their own maintenance, or they might have a maintenance worker or something like this. In the last several years, probably the last decade, the mom and pops are beginning to not be apparent in coming into the market. We're seeing now charter schools that are coming in based on charter management organizations that really put forth the application for the school, they put the board together, and they really, in many ways, own that school. So if most of these management companies are for-profit, so they have the ability to put the school in place with a nonprofit board, and then all of the management of the school is taken care of by the management company. So they can buy property, they can charge the school whatever rent they want for the property, they can hire the teachers, pay the teachers whatever they want. It's becoming a business, and that is where I think so many people are having the difficulties. In Sarasota County, we have two new, within the last several years, schools. One is a classical academy that will be starting this next year, and one is now in Venice, but they are managed by Charter Schools USA. Charter Schools USA conducts all business. And so to kind of differentiate how that really plays into the taxpayer, let's say that Student Leadership Academy in Venice, for whatever reason, although they're an A, they've been A's forever and ever, and then let's say they go out of business. Anything that was purchased with taxpayer dollars would come back to the school district, because that's the receiver of those dollars. If a Charter School USA or an Academica for-profit charter chain were to go out of business, that school would go out of business, all of the property goes to that management organization. So all the taxpayer dollars that came in and paid for rent and all of that kind of thing, and maybe even buildings, would be taken out of the public revenue. And it is legal in the state of Florida.
But
So,
do you create engineered obsolescence and have your school fail, take the asset back and flip it?
That's the question.
I would not.
Of course you do.
I would absolutely say that if you look at most of the owners of some of these for-profit companies, they have an extensive real estate portfolio and
Private
background.
equity backing, I'm sure.
Yeah. So anyway, obviously, I'm trying to be not on political here, but we're losing a lot.
Yeah.
And now that takes us to another form of charter schools that has hit the market, and that's Schools of Hope. And Schools of Hope were originally designed in 2017 to be an alternative for schools that were failing. So that students that were in failing schools that had maybe D and F grades for a number of years, the legislature gave Schools of Hope, which they named these charter managers, the ability to come in within a 5-mile radius of that school and set up a charter school so that parents would have an option. Well, just like with the vouchers, that was the camel's nose under the tent. And so there was an experiment. There was a takeover, actually, of all Jefferson County schools by Somerset Academy, which is part of Academica, and that's a charter school chain. The district was a D-rated district when they came in. They fired teachers. They reassigned staff and reassigned students all over the place, made lots of changes, left the district several years later as a D and in complete shambles. So I'm not saying that that's going to happen everywhere, but that was a classic failure, which only allowed for a crazy kind of legislator to come in and say, we're going to expand it now. So in the last legislative session, last year, there was a bill to expand Schools of Hope, and it failed. It failed. It died. Well, remember last year we had a special session on the budget that extended the time of the legislature. The last minutes of that legislative session that was supposed to just approve the budget, there was a very, very wealthy individual, hedge fund manager, who came in and brokered a deal that not only allowed the proliferation of Schools of Hope, but also allowed co-locations, so that if a school, let's say such as Wilkinson Elementary, had seats that were not filled with students, Schools of Hope, and there's several providers, could say, I want X number of seats in that school. And not only could they do it, the district had to pay all of the transportation for those students, food service, nursing service, all of the management of a school without any compensation to the district. And the Schools of Hope would also then get increased funding and permanent increases every year in the form of grants and loans. So not really well accepted. You probably heard some of this that last year. There was a huge hue and cry in this legislative session, and it was actually Stan, Lucas, a number of people absolutely at school board and at the legislature saying this is untenable. So there's certain things that we think are there's been a change in the rules which is more definitive about the kinds of things that can be collated. And we're hoping that in the future we can get a repeal, but right now it's still in there. And the school district in Sarasota has done a really, really good job offsetting this, but it's not going away.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Deb. The recent legislation would have, not only would the Schools of Hope have to pay for some of the services that originally were going to be free, but companies can now only ask for 5, put in 5 applications a year. And so the legislature has responded to a lot of the advocacy that was done, a lot of the concerns that people have had about Schools of Hope. So thank you.
Just think about this. If Wilkinson isn't full, there are no students to fill it. So where is that School of Hope going to get the students? So.
Yeah, I mean, people were talking about some of the issues that Schools of Hope would create for a school district. Like, what if you have a different start time, okay, or end time? Or how do you share the baseball or football field? What do you do about tryouts for plays and performances when you're competing for that space? What do you do about lunchtime? So it really, they hadn't thought it through very well, so, to say the least. So another concern that people have expressed about what's happening with our public schools has been sort of an erosion of the separation of church and state. And Norm, I want to ask you about that. Is that a legitimate concern? Is there anything that's going on that says, yeah, we should pay attention to this because things are happening?
Well, first, let me say I've been a long-time admirer of the League of Women Voters and the voter advocacy work you do, and balanced reports on different candidates and stuff. It's very special. Thank you. Yeah, we've got a problem, and right here in River City. Look, it's no secret that we have a Congress, we have a state legislature that is composed of conservatives who have as a big part of their base evangelical Christians. They have been a big influence in their policy making. Now, this is not all of the evangelical groups. I'm really focused on those that we have identified as Christian nationalists. Now, Christian nationalists are those who believe that this is not only a Christian nation, but that only Christians should be in government, and that only Christian policies should rule the day. This is a growing movement. I'm going to give you some examples of what's going on in a minute, but there are a lot of groups that are Christian nationalists, organizations that are big lobbying efforts and are in all state and in the federal legislature lobbying. There's the First Policy Institute, the Federalist Society, the Alliance Defending Freedom, the Center for Christian Virtue, Moms for Liberty, Family Research Council, the Heritage Foundation, and there are many more. Some of these I'm sure you've heard about. You've heard from the two speakers before me about things that happened in 1990s. Well, I want to mention something that happened in 1990 that really changed things in the public schools in terms of church-state concerns. The Supreme Court upheld a bill, a law actually, that was passed called the Equal Access Law. This was a unique thing that really turned the corner in a negative way on church-state separation, because what it did, it allowed religious groups to be able to be official school clubs. And as a result, a lot of religious groups are now in the public schools. Technically, according to the law, they're only supposed to be involved in student-led activities, not led by staff or involvement of staff or advisors and the like. Well, unfortunately, that's not always the case. You may recognize some of the groups that have been in the schools, and these are, by the way, these are all good Christian groups. I'm not criticizing the groups and what they do. The question is, should they be in the public schools operating during school, after school, before school, etc.? Some of those groups are Charlie Kirk's Turning Points USA, Young Life, Youth for Christ. There are several of them that are in the schools. And, the Supreme Court established a test to determine if a law was constitutional or if a bill was constitutional. It's called the three-part test. The three-part test basically determines whether something is constitutional. The three parts of the test, all three have to exist for something to be according to the Constitution. One, it must have a secular, non-religious purpose. Two, it should neither advance nor inhibit religion. And three, it must not result in excessive government entanglement with religion. Now, the administration's focus and our state's focus has only been on the free access element of separation of church and state, not it all about government entanglement. And that's the big shift that's been happening. In February, the Department of Education came out with the following statement. Parents and children have a constitutional right to take part in public schools in ways that align with their sincerely held religious beliefs. School officials should allow members of the public school community to act and speak accordingly to their faith. Of course, there's no mention here either about no government entanglement. So, what are some of the specific things that are happening in our state and around the country that are evidence of the erosion of the separation of church and state? I mentioned the equal access law. We now have groups before school around the flagpole, saying prayers and doing things that didn't normally happen previously. There are prayers before sporting events or at assemblies. And again, for individuals to be able to pray whenever they want, there's nothing that prohibits that in church-state separation. It's when it becomes school entangled, when it becomes something that is fostered by the school is a government entity, and that is the state. And so that's why these are problematic. Now, there are a lot of bills in Florida this year. There's a bill to add protection to the Constitution prohibiting discrimination based on religious viewpoints or expressions in public schools. If passed, it would require schools to allow religious expression in coursework, allow religious messages and beliefs in assignments, if it's passed. By the way, a lot of these bills get passed and then it gets reversed in the courts or they get adapted differently, but there are these bills and more are getting passed. Adding moments of silence and opening remarks that include prayer in school, that's another one. A bill to require the display of God, in God we trust, in all school libraries, cafeterias, etc. Clergy to substitute for counselors in schools. We've already seen that pass last year, or I think the year before. A bill to prohibit employers from disciplining workers due to their religious or other beliefs against gender identity. It's a backdoor way of dealing with the LGBT concerns. Bill to prohibit schools from discriminating against students or personnel based on political, religious, or ideological viewpoints. Again, promoting the religious expression, not talking at all about what are the guardrails. Bill to prohibit counties and cities from adopting or enforcing regulations that can burden free exercise of religion. Is it freedom of expression or a backdoor to entanglement? There are a lot of other states that have already passed things or have bills going. In North Dakota, to teach creationism. In Oklahoma, K-12 social studies infused with Christianity. Arkansas, Louisiana, Tennessee, and Texas, 10 Commandment displays, Bible distributions, and instruction. Alabama, mandating daily prayer in public schools. Ohio, Christian organizations influencing the legislature for anti-LGBT bills, morality issues, state funding of private and religious schools. They say the focus is on family values. They are attempting to fund religious charter schools. Christian bands are proselytizing during school hours. In Nebraska, there's a bill to require the 10 Commandments in public and all private denominational and parochial schools. Nebraska has a bill hiring chaplains also in schools. This is all part of the culture that's been fueled by Christian nationalism. It's important to note, though, that there is opposition to this. There are groups like Americans United for Separation of Church and State, the ACLU, and other religious and nonprofit groups who monitor and take action to counteract the intrusion of religion in the public schools. But there's something that happened just this week. Actually, it was yesterday that came out of the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. I don't know if any of you saw this, but this morning, this is a report from people who were attending a briefing by their commander. These were NCOs. This morning, our commander opened up the combat readiness status briefing by urging us not to be afraid as to what is happening with our combat operations in Iran right now. He urged us to tell our troops that this was all part of God's divine plan. He specifically referenced numerous citations out of the book of Revelation referring to Armageddon and the imminent return of Jesus.
That's reassuring, isn't it?
He said that President Trump has been anointed by Jesus to light the signal fire in Iran to cause Armageddon and cause his return to earth. Now, this is official briefing by representatives of our government to the troops. This is where we're heading, gang, and we need to be prepared to fight it. This is all part of Christian nationalism. And who is one of the biggest proponents of Christian nationalism? Hedgestaff.
Well, thank you very, very much, Norm. Yeah. So we've heard,
I'm gonna hold on to this now.
we've heard a lot about different concerns. We've got budget concerns, we've got separation of church and state concerns, we have schools of hope concerns. Lucas, question for you. What are students in Sarasota doing to express their concerns and to make their voices heard?
So students in Sarasota are doing all sorts of things, and I would say the main source, would be naturally social media. I know that any organization ever that's trying to get students involved with their movement is pushing out trends on social media, because that's just what gets students' attention. No kid is taking a breath to read a flyer or an ad in a newspaper, because Instagram and Snapchat are the way of the wind now. When big controversies like the ICE resolution recently introduced by Sarasota's board chair, there are hundreds of reposts on people's stories trying to get their friends and peers informed and involved. Obviously, the downside to this is misinformation. Social media is quick, and it's so quick, so fast-paced, that it's this huge interconnected game of telephone. Kids at school are talking about it all day, like, I heard this, or John said that, and then they go home and they see videos about it and they post their own interpretation of it. And I'm not saying that we're incompetent because we fall victim to misinformation or rumors, because everybody does that. And I'm sure that if I posted an AI video of a cat singing, that people would believe it. Because social media has a huge reputation for being a wildfire of untrustworthy messages, granted unearned reputation, and our generation is just on social media constantly. Students are still very competent, and people get that wrong a lot. Our Sarasota school board members get that wrong a lot. Yeah. We might trust the wrong person or not fact check every TikTok video, but we're still kids. We tend to trust what our teachers, principals, and board members are saying because they're supposed to be our role models. It does not make us gullible, it just makes us kids. At the same time, we're kids going to Ivies, gaining incredible internships and work experience, so we're definitely not incapable of grasping complex concepts. Luckily, as misinformation becomes more common, educating and fact-checking also rises in popularity. It's kind of becoming lame in a way to trust every video you see on TikTok without double checking it with a Google search, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think the most important thing Sarasota students are doing to make their voices heard are turning out at school board meetings. We've had incredible student attendance at board meetings in recent years, and it's only increasing even with the 10 a.m. board times. What's even more special is that us students walk into the boardroom with the levels of education and intelligence this county has given us, and it scares people. For board members with zero education experience and no kids in the public school system, students speaking coherently and sharply is their worst nightmare. That's why it's so crucial we make board meetings accessible for students. We're the future of this country, and the education choices our school board makes dictate how we contribute to our nation. That's why it's so upsetting that the board meetings are at 10 a.m. They're silencing us because we have visions and opinions about our future, and they know people care, like you guys, and that they're supposed to care. So even if you might not be on social media or you don't see students in the boardroom, just remember Sarasota students are talking, and we are trying to make our voices heard. We just need extra help sometimes from people who already have platforms. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak today and represent the students of Sarasota and to tell everyone who listens to care about us because we need it. And to my peers, bring friends to meeting, blast it on your socials even if you can't go. Talk to me if you need help or information. I'll always respond on Instagram. I want to help bridge bridge the worlds of student life and student organizing.
Thank you, Lucas, very good. So let me ask you another question. Not every student is doing advocacy work. Sometimes they just don't do it. Do you know why? What keeps them from doing some of the advocacy that you've described?
Yeah, I mean, students might just generally not be interested, but I think parental concern and lack of help blocks students the most. So I know that when I'm trying to gather students to come to school board meetings, the usual answer is that they would love to go, but their parents wouldn't allow them. And this has been multiplied by the fact that board meetings are at 10 a.m. I briefly touched on this earlier, but this is blatant discrimination against students, teachers, and working parents. It's unfair to all students, but especially students like me whose parents don't have the time or energy to advocate on my behalf. That's just if you have supportive parents. As students, we don't have as much free range as we wish we could have. Some parents see all forms of advocacy as dangerous because of what they've personally gone through or what they see on the news. Or they just don't want their kids being overtly political, being on the news. Whatever the reason may be, they're just not comfortable with their kids going to any kind of event related to policy, including school board meetings. And while those fears are very real and should not be dismissed, I think students or parents should be more open to at least discussions about school board meetings because these meetings directly affect them. The decisions made in that boardroom directly impact Sarasota public school families, and more people should pay attention to them. However, even if parents support their kids in going to school board meetings, they still might not be able to attend. This could be for a variety of reasons, such as transportation to and fro, schoolwork, or even social anxiety. Going to a school board meeting alone is not something a lot of people are comfortable with, especially a student, and especially for the first time. That's why I think we should have clubs or groups to easily reach out to students interested in attending school board meetings and networks to set them up to help them be prepared for whatever they need. I know Booker High School has a club where they arrange ride shares and discuss the agenda of upcoming school board meetings. And personally, I get my agenda breakdown from Sea Alliance, which, if you don't know, is a nonprofit that's youth-led and helps with school board organizing. But you don't need to be a student or parent to help or utilize their resources, which is pretty cool. But clubs or groups such as these are so important in making safe organizing accessible for students. Another reason why students need more help is that agendas for school board meetings are nearly impossible to read and comprehend by oneself, and even more difficult with the added time constraint. The last thing a high schooler wants to do on top of SAT studying is to read a lengthy, confusingly written agenda with intense law vocabulary. I know I do not. I tried to read the agenda one time by myself, and I think I did all right, but I would not wish that on any other student, especially one trying to go to a meeting for the first time. So I think the promotion of school board meetings in schools would be helpful too. Lots of students don't know about the importance of school board meetings, let alone their existence. If that's surprising to you, it's true. Even if just over the school intercom they announced an upcoming school board meeting, that might get kids buzzing about it more. I know that it might be harder to do now that the meetings are at 10 a.m. and it could be seen as promotion to skip class, but it's ridiculous we should have to skip class in the first place, which I could go on a long tangent about how insane the meeting times is, but I won't. I will say, though, that it's a major stop sign for students wanting to attend board meetings. So to sum it up, parental concern and lack of accessibility to advocacy stop students the most from participating, even for their own education.
Thank you. So you've talked a lot about school board, and I just want to mention we actually have a candidate for school board here tonight. Beth Mayberry is here in the back. Thank you for coming. And also, Jimmy Glover's not here, but his campaign manager is here if you want to talk to him after we're done, Greg Matthews. So thank you both for coming. So I have one more question for you, Lucas. I know you talked a lot about, what the school board does, but there's also been a lot of legislation that affects students. Have you noticed any effect that any of the legislation has had on the students? How are they responding to it?
So the short answer is yes. And this is a funny question for me because I go to Suncoast Polytechnical High School, and if you don't know, Polytech was recently threatened to be merged with Brookside Middle's campus to create a 6th through 12th grade school. And the reasoning behind this was because of Schools of Hope threatening to take over campuses in our county and needing to boost underperforming schools. So every student in my school was talking about it as soon as the news broke, and there was naturally misinformation, but also a lot of scarily accurate information. Students are paying close attention and spreading the word accurately. Polytech is a unique school, with kids who go there looking for specific resources and community. No student wanted this merge to happen. Students spoke out, and we had a surge of attendance at school board meetings akin to the ICE resolution meeting, but it was flooded with Polytech and Brookside families. I was so proud to see this. Students at my school were creating flyers and holding meetings during lunches to coordinate how to fight back and getting to the meeting. Even kids for whom it was their first time being at a school board meeting knew what to do and where to sign up to speak because they had been so well informed by their peers. This is my strongest example of how the higher legislation has affected Sarasota students because it was not only recent but personal to me, and I experienced it firsthand. I can only speak so much on the Wilkinson issue, which also pertained to school closures. That would be Jody's area of expertise with kids at Wilkinson. But another huge impact from higher legislation is budget cuts. There's so many effects of this, but a major one I've seen is staff shortages. Teachers that cannot teach their subject should not be in our schools, but they are, and it's terrifying. I know a peer from Booker High last year told me she was doing coloring sheets as her AP Lang assignment, and I laughed because I thought she was joking, and then she reassured me she was not joking and showed me pictures of her and her classmates doing coloring sheets in class. She did not know how to write the essays she needed to write to pass the AP exam, and that's very upsetting. Even if she might not have cared about it, I'm sure that other students do. And while Sarasota County generally has great teachers, this uncommon phenomenon is not as uncommon in other districts of Florida. Budget slashing legislation impacts our county, of course, and if the words 2.2 million mean anything to you, you know what I'm talking about. But we should also pay attention to how it affects our neighboring districts that might not have the funds that Holly was talking about, that might be affected more. Teachers aren't the only thing being short-circuited, however, but other staff members such as mental health professionals and counselors are too. Speaking as a student, I know everybody complains about counselors. Either they never have the time of day for you, or when they do, they don't know what they're doing. Being a counselor is a hard job from what I understand, but being a student and having to re-explain who you are and what help you need to a multitude of different people throughout your school years because they keep being replaced is also hard. My school got new counselors this year for the millionth time, and it being my senior year, the year you visit the counselor the most, everybody was complaining about it. It's not necessarily their fault that students are complaining, but simply that they have such a massive workload and not enough hours in the day to sort it all out. Not to mention, I go to a small school. My senior class has a mere 150 students in it. I cannot even begin to imagine how bad it is in other schools with triple the amount. My friend, who's a senior at Sarasota High School, says she doesn't even know who her counselor is. I asked her if she thinks it's because they're overwhelmed, and she said, of course they are. There are 2,500 students at Sarasota High School, which means 400 students per counselor, because they only have 6 counselors. And that kind of workload is not sustainable, and it's upsetting. But that's the hand that Florida districts have been dealt. A lot of the education legislature being passed is honestly a joke to me and my peers. We have endless complaints about the lack of care or thought being put, to the point where we know our representatives in Center by name. How many of y'all know Greg Stubbe, Rick Scott, and Ashley Moody? The point is that I think students have a whole list of reasons to dislike our Florida legislature and Department of Education specifically, but the most prevalent reasons are schools of hope and insane budget deficits.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for mentioning how important parents are to some of the decisions that students are making about what they can do and can't do. So Jody, questions for you about parent engagement. What does meaningful parent engagement look like? And how can we help parents become more involved in advocating for the public schools and for their children?
Good evening, Jill. Thank you so much for hosting this. Thanks for having us all here so we can talk about it, and for everything that the League of Women Voters does for everyone, making sure everyone stays informed about voter registration, voting dates. Please make sure you come out to the polls August 18th. It is a primary district, but it's a district-wide vote. It's nonpartisan. So make sure you use your ability to vote and go out and do that. As a Wilkinson mom, I've learned over the past year, not just this year, but I started going to school board meetings about 3 years ago. We had about $80,000 in cuts, and I found that out sitting on the Student Advisory Council. I volunteer at my kids' school. I have a 5, 7, and 10-year-old. So I'm there 3 to 5 times a week. More than just parent pickup. I'm an overly involved parent. And I heard rumors last summer that school was closing. So since I've been going to the school board meetings, I started when we lost our behavioral coaches. My kids are special needs. They're on the spectrum. They need that little bit extra, those accommodations that only parents can give, teachers can give, trained, specialized teachers can give, to be able to get those grades up to reading level, math level, so that they can go on and become amazing human beings. But when they're missing that in the beginning, and it's really hard to diagnose preschool kids, elementary school kids. So I went to the school board. I asked for help. I was given a resiliency training program to take, and I learned how to talk to my kids and teach them how to be resilient. And it was through the Florida Department of Education. So I had started to build a relationship, not just with my kids' school and the administration and the teachers and the other students. Now I'm getting to know the district and how this works. So I would go, and it is really hard to go and speak at the school board. When you go by yourself, when you cross that picket line, when you stand up, and you're just so motivated on the inside to be able to say, okay, we're going to speak up because something's wrong. And if I don't do it, who's gonna? So I went, built some relationships, and when I heard rumor, one of the moms called. We have a very close-knit community at Wilkinson. It's a very small community school. There's under 300 kids, under 400 kids, and we're a Title I school. So we have low income, we have all the funding that comes, and I moved to my neighborhood so I could walk to school. That was the whole point in buying our house there. I wanted to make sure I pay my taxes, I know where the funds are going. My kids have special needs, so they get that IEP, that specialized education that only a public school is required by law to give them. They're not going to get that in a charter school. They're not going to get that in a private school. IEPs and 504s are only guaranteed through public education. And that funding comes from our taxes. So I got the gusto up, went in, and asked the district, because at this point, we drove down to Venice. It was a 6 p.m. meeting, and it was one of those meetings where you could talk, and some of the board members were there. I had called, and I got no answer on whether the school was going to close or not. So I drove from Sarasota County all the way down to Venice, and I crossed the picket line, sat in the back of the room. Luckily, I had another mom there to hold my hand. And we were going to figure this out and get to the bottom of it. Because at this point, there's about 5 of us that would text each other, and we'd have a group text. So that's how it really started, because, moms talk. And dads. Were, but mostly moms. So we would come to school and went to this meeting. This was in August. I specifically asked Superintendent Connor if there were any rumors that Wilkinson was closing, that the Landings was going to sell their facility and move into Wilkinson, because that was the rumor. And we're in August. School just started. Yeah. I'm trying to figure out where we're signing up for classes, how to find a reading tutor, which is the right homeroom, when coffee time is, when I'm reading with my kids, because, I go and I'm part of this amazing program called Rocking Reader. And I go and I spend a day there every week, and I read with first graders. Not my kids. Somebody else reads to my kids. They're in there too. But, that's one thing. As a level 2 volunteer with Sarasota County, if you go and you get the fingerprints, you get the background check, you can go and volunteer with our students. And it's as simple as reading a library book to them once a week. That's it. Those are the volunteers we need. If you're a retired teacher, go read to the kids. If you're a mom, if you're a dad, if you're grandma or grandpa, go read with the kids. It's simple stuff. Say hi in the morning. That's how we develop the parent engagement. We would meet each other at parent pickup, at Walker's Gate. Hey, how's it going? You've got an allergy, right? Can you watch the kids? Because I don't trust anybody, and we don't do babysitters. But you're my neighbor. This is our community. We all go to school together. We all have the same homework. We know each other's allergies. We know where each other lives. So the school board these are the moms that went to the school board meeting with me. And they told me that night that they never roundtabled about it, that none of the school board members had broken sunshine law, and that they would get back to me the next week. Well, the next week was a workshop. By the way, check the workshops out. Yeah. Like yesterday's workshop, that's where you find the really good information, especially for second and third quarter. They talked about that yesterday, so go back and check that out. There's some snippets that would really affect, if these rules were in play 6 months ago when we found all these things out, we wouldn't be able to have a walkout. We wouldn't be able to protest. We wouldn't be able to stand up and teach our kids how to advocate for themselves. But I digress. I went to the workshop, and I was handed a 44-page, never been talked about, but the notes, the agenda packet. Right. 44 pages. Risk management, comprehensive analysis, the financial plans. They had gone to each of the schools. They had even figured out the cost that it would take to keep the landings, to bring it up to code, and why it was so important for a certain developer to purchase it. Circles back around. Remember those schools of hope, the ones that specifically came to our county? It's a real estate developer that's at the helm. So development wanted to move our landings into Wilkinson. Well, I texted the mom that texted me, who texted the other 3 moms, and the mom with her texted the other 3 moms, and we all decided we were going to have a play date in the park. We're very grateful for Support Our Schools and C and all of these other organizations who stood there with us. You know, we had to brave walking past them because they've been doing this. They're confident. They know that voices speaking up for public education means something. So they're out there and they're doing the hard work. They're holding the signs. They're doing that stuff. Well, moms like me get intimidated by that. Kids get intimidated by that. So it's really hard to get parents to come to the school board meeting until there's a fire lit. Wilkinson was set to be the first school in over 100 years to close in Sarasota County. In the 1930s, there was Northport High School was closed. They found out the funding and they fixed the budget and reopened. And then Booker High School in the 70s was desegregated and reopened. Other than that, Wilkinson was the first time they were speaking about closing a school in Sarasota history. So we had this play date in the park and we planned what we were going to do. We decided we were going to make signs. We were going to wear t-shirts. We were going to show our school spirit and we were going to show up to the school board meetings. Not only did we show up to school board meetings, but we called each other. We called our congressmen, our senators. You know, when you have these people like Rick Scott or who are the other ones? Moody.
We met with McFarland.
We met with McFarland. I met with Buchanan, Unger, everybody. And they're calling and being like, hey, let's figure this out. Because, and I don't politic well. Okay. I'm learning it. But I'm a mom. That's my job. To take care of my kids, to take care of my community. So I don't care if you're red, I don't care if you're blue, I don't care which side it is. My green money pays taxes. Those tax dollars go to the school. That takes care of my children. Mm-hmm. When you mess with my tax dollars and you mess with my children, I get very upset. And I got a big mouth. And I find a lot of moms who care about their kids did the same thing. So we called, we wrote letters, we used social media. We went school to school. I went to every school in Sarasota County and spoke to parents. I was at every school board meeting and spoke to parents. So that's how you build engagement. But for us, it was building community. Mm-hmm. It was talking to each other. It was having the hard conversations, especially with the neighbors you don't like. Because their main focus is their kids too. Their money's being spent and diverted from other places too. So what can we do now? Wilkinson stayed open. We partnered with the school board members. We partnered with the superintendent. We came with solution-based opportunities that we thought we could bring to the table and bring change and make change. And we were successful in doing so. We met and we requested from the district multiple meetings at multiple times of day with multiple languages. And we wanted it to be interactive, and we got that. It took a lot of work, it took a lot of planning, and it took a lot of help. But we were able to reach out to the news media. We were able to reach out to social media, and we were able to reach out to other schools and share the shared experience. Because once Wilkinson was affected, it was then Polytech. Then it was, they threatened Oak Park, Brookside, and Gulfgate, and Booker. Mm-hmm. So those notices that went out, and they came in, the Schools of Hope said, hey, we're going to come and file we're going to move into your county, we're going to co-locate, we're going to take over your school, and when they take over, it's that contiguous footprint. So when they want something, they're the boss. On our dime, sucking all the funds that we pay, and they're not held to the same standards that a public school is. Okay, they're not doing the FAST test. They're not required to get the reading literacy scores up. They're not required to follow IDEA. They don't have to give IEPs. They don't have to make accommodations. They don't have to help those kids. The only thing they do is they take that money that we pay in our tax dollars for each of those kids.
We profit.
And they
Thank you
profit.
so much, Jody. Your story of what you started, you and Holly was involved with that as well, is a story that we want to remember, because this is what advocacy can do. So we want to stay hopeful. We want to continue to work, to do the work, because as things get worse in terms of the legislation, we have to continue to be strong and even stronger and even bigger. Okay, a small group can do good things, but if you can be even bigger and outreach to many more people who don't know what's going on. Tonight's meeting has been so helpful. I think everybody here has learned something that they didn't know that they can use to go out and talk to people, and when people tell you something that you know is misinformation, you can use what you learned tonight to correct their misconceptions about public schools and what's going on. And I want to thank the panel. You've done an amazing job. We're going to open up to questions. I also want you to know that Julia Johnson is here. She is co-president of the Sarasota League of Women Voters. And if you have any questions, if you're not a member yet of the league, talk to Julia. She'll help you out. But let's open this up to questions. Yes.
I have a question. I've been told, or I don't know, are some of these private schools and charter schools, do they still have, do the teachers must be certified as
No.
real teachers?
No.
That, I've heard that they don't, and that's to me, is a real problem.
Let me clarify that, because that is really important. First of all, I want to clarify about ESE too. Public schools, if they're charters or traditional, are held to ESE standards. That's federal law. Not all charter schools give services equally, but they are held to that standard. Private schools are not. They do not require that. Schools of Hope legislation has a lot of things that they don't have to do, and certified teachers are one of those. They also, for whatever reason, the Schools of Hope legislation said they don't have to follow charter school law. So they've kind of got their own little silo, but there's a lot of things that they do not have to do.
There is a brochure that the league has created. It's all about school choice, and what it does is they are free to take. The one that says school choice, it's in Spanish and in English. I wish I knew Russian. We'd have a Russian one as well. But it lists what traditional district schools, district managed schools offer, what they're required to do. It lists charter schools and which things they're required to do. And then it lists private schools. And it really, when I met with some legislators about 2 years ago, I had the original copy of that with me. They were really impressed. They said, "Oh, I didn't know that." It lays it out really easily, simple to read. So maybe that's what legislators need. I don't know. Other questions? Yes.
Hi, Jill. I have a question. I've been going through all of this in a long career in education and all sorts of things. And so why I'm involved again, because I care. I didn't do all those years just not to care now. But what is it? Is there something that parents they think they're avoiding if they're making some of these private, homeschool, even charter somewhat, but there must be something, because we know most parents would say, I want the best for my kid, right? But why are they seeing these other choices as maybe better for their child? What is it that somebody's selling out there? It's making them feel, we all raised our hands, went to public school, you know? But that's not the case. Has anybody been able to put your finger on it?
So, if you're able to be a stay-at-home parent and homeschool your kids, and you're able to get $8,000 to $24,000 a year to go towards your homeschool education, well, homeschool education isn't as regulated as public school. It's not regulated anywhere close to private school, and neither one of those go up against public education.
So it's a money.
There's a
cases.
money thing in some cases, but some families have 4 and 5 children. So
Why would you want them at home?
well, when
Sorry, I love them.
I have 16 with my kids and all my nieces and nephews. There's 16 under 12. 5 of those are homeschooled, and they use the vouchers, but they're a faith-based religion. They write their own, their curriculum. It's not for everyone, but when you can, and you have that ability, and you're getting that extra funds that make it accessible and make it shiny, because hey, those funds right now, they've got no regulations on them, so we could go to Disney, or we could go to a trip to the zoo, or we could buy our passes to Moat, and that's great. It works if you're teaching.
Is it per child?
Yeah, it's per child.
Oh, yeah, it's
It's
almost
per
9,000.
child.